Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. So, as probably a lot of you have heard by now, Elon Musk looks set to actually buy Twitter instead of solving. He, at the very least, made a pledge of, hey, if the UN can come up with a plan to end global hunger, then he would absolutely finance it. And then he never did, and he bought Twitter. And there's just like so many other things he could have done with that, right? But the wildest thing about this entire story is that a guy set himself on fire in front of the Supreme Court and nearly no one is talking about it. Yeah, sorry for the jarring transition, but this is something that should actually be talked about a little bit more. Crazy how a guy self-immolates in the country's capital in front of the Supreme Court on Earth Day in protest of climate change in action, and it's barely a blip on the media and social radar. That is how I found out about this after Earth Day, right? So that's a sign of how terrible the current situation is in terms of algorithms and how things are happening. So, hey, maybe, Elon Musk does fix that or not. Personally, I recognize we live in the bad time. I'm not really expecting a whole lot of actual progress and meaningful reform in this regard. But again, to really focus on what should be a much bigger story, yesterday, on Earth Day, a man named Wynne Allen Bruce set himself on fire in front of the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. Those who knew Wynne described him as very kind, someone who cared about stopping climate change. Yeah, this man decided to take matters into his own hands and light himself on fire to protest climate change. And personally, for me, it's not exactly a coincidence that this event came only just a few days after climate scientists chained themselves to buildings in protest, trying to scream about the warnings of the dire situation that we are in and how it's only going to get worse from here unless we meaningfully address the problem. And even the IPCC has called on this as well. So this, to me, is not entirely a coincidence. However, what's incredibly disturbing is that the few places that did decide to report on it aren't making mention of the fact that he set himself on fire because of the climate crisis. What the news isn't reporting is this man set himself on fire on Earth Day because of the climate crisis. I don't know how to feel about this. I know how I feel about this. I'm absolutely flabbergasted and terrified and mortified. And I'm feeling like I'm all of a sudden on the set of Don't Look Up. And it's a fever dream, or it's a new tactic that my sleep paralysis demon is using on me to incredible effect, I might add. But that person wasn't the only one noticing this terrible and unfortunate trend with the media not reporting on this, or if they did report on it, not entirely. 4 different articles I've read about this, and not one has mentioned that he was a climate change activist. Probably a coincidence. Yeah, no. This happened on Earth Day. And in the wake of climate scientists practically screaming at the world to listen to them and the IPCC report while they chained themselves to buildings, and it barely got a mention anywhere. Don't Look Up was apparently a fucking prophecy. And not to make too many assumptions here, right? But who knows? Maybe Wynne decided that this could potentially be something that would call attention to this crisis. Similar in vein to how that Tunisian man, who in the wake of his fruit cart being ticketed and fined and carted away, and so he lost the only little source of income that he had, and he had no other recourse, and he set himself on fire, and that kicked off the Tunisian revolution, and then that in turn kicked off the Arab Spring in 2011. So maybe he was hoping that this would be something kind of like that, especially since we clearly didn't listen to the IPCC reports and no one really paid attention or heard about the climate scientists chaining themselves to buildings. And he hoped that this might have been the real warning sign, the alarm bell that would finally make people clue into the seriousness of the problem. And it hasn't been. I had to find out about this from that very first tweet. Never mind the news or the UN or a governmental agency about climate change and feeling very sorry that it came to this. No, I had to find out from a goddamn tweet. And so he hoped to send a message, a very clear, loud, and personal, and devastating and horrifying message to people. And it's silence. It is pure, deafening silence about an issue that impacts every single life form on this planet. And to tie this all back in to the way I, tricked everyone at the beginning of the video, all of it doesn't matter, right? Here, people are talking about, we're leaving Twitter. What's the alternative? We're just going to stick around here. Oh, look, Elon Musk is buying this instead of solving the housing crisis or solving global hunger like he promised to do. And if he clearly has billions lying around, then he clearly isn't paying enough taxes. And people are defending him. And just like, I can't stress enough how much in the greater scheme of things, it does not fucking matter. What matters is this planet that we all share, and people trying to warn us about this and provide us with actual solutions and warn us about the narrowing window of opportunity that we have to save the planet for ourselves and future generations. There is no shit posting in a post-apocalyptic future. There is no capitalism. There is no economy. There is no terribleness and crypto and all these other things that keep dominating the world and its discourse. None of this matters on a dead and dying planet. And the situation has gotten so incredibly dire that a man saw no recourse than to set himself on fire on the steps of the Supreme Court of the United States. And the universal reaction is, what? Sorry, did you hear something? It's absolutely infuriating, and it's a sign of the dark times to come. We're just barely getting started. And this poor man who thought he would hopefully send a message, make people listen, and just heed the warnings that he and hundreds, if not thousands of other climate scientists have been saying for decades, and it's been nothing. That is infuriating, that is terrifying, and it's definitely what's bothering me today.